Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is we need to style the footer so that it looks like this. All right. Um, right now, this is what we have it looking like. Okay, so if you go and look at this, let's get her image to be smaller and round and with a border, and let's see what we can do from there. And also so that's floating left of this text. Okay, so let's take a look first of all at the HTML to see what we've got. I'm going to collapse the section and let's look at the footer. Okay, so the footer has an H3 in it, and then it has an IMG tag, and then it has a paragraph. Okay, so let's go ahead first and let's start by styling. I guess the first thing we can do is start by styling the image tag that's in the footer. And we want to be specific because the image that's in the footer is going to be different than all the other images. So what we'll do is we'll just say footer IMG. All right, and I'm going to first of all tell it to be, let's look at ours so that we know what's happening. All right, let's do this. So I'm going to tell it first to be a width. Let's try about 30%. Let's see what that does. Okay, that's a nice smaller size. And then to make it round, let's do border radius because it's a square image. If it weren't square, it wouldn't work. It would make it oval shaped, but let's do border radius 50%, and then that turns it into something that is round. And then we can do padding on it. And the reason I want to do padding is if you were to take a look here, you'll see, you notice how there is space in between the border and the image. Well, that's because it's got padding. All right, so let's jump back over here and let's do padding. Let's try, I don't know, let's try like 5 pixels or something all the way around. And then the next thing that we can do, since we've got that padding now, is we can add the borders. Let's do a border. And let's try like maybe 1 pixel solid. And I'm going to use a color that I've already used, that magenta color, like that. It's the same color that I selected from up in here. All right, so and if you were not sure about it, you could always come over here and you could say inspect. Let's do an inspector. If you wanted to find the color that you want to use, you could always, choose like this and then grab it that way. All right, so that's the other option that you can do. All right, so now let's close this up and look at it. So that's 30%, but the problem is that we still have this text. Oops, sorry, wrong button. We still have this text that's beside it, but now it's actually below it. And we need to tell this footer image to basically float to the left. So let's do float left. And the text should be, it's probably right there. 30% might be a little bit large. So maybe we can try something like 20% and see if that's a little bit better. Might be a little bit better. The other thing too that I want to do is you'll notice that this footer is all the way up to the edge. So we need to treat it the way that we treated this section in the same or in a similar sense. So if we go up here where it says section, we can say width, max width 80%, margin auto. We can go ahead and grab the padding. Maybe that'll work too, but this is going to be on just the footer. All right, so let's just do footer and we'll paste those. Oops, we'll accidentally copied something that was blank right there. We'll paste that rule in, and then you see that it takes the same properties. Do a refresh, but the problem is now you see this is what I was describing before, that I can't scroll past this. All right, it's not clearing it; it's cutting some of that stuff off. What that means is that I need to look at my HTML structure and see, like, I don't want to just pad the footer. I can pad the article so that there's space at the bottom of the article if I want. That's an option. So that is something that we can go in here and do. Let's add, let's just go, I guess, add it right before the section. Actually, before, let's do it before the header, because the header is inside of the article. So let's do article. And we'll do padding bottom. I don't want to affect all the other padding, so let's just isolate the bottom. And let's try something like 90 pixels because that's how tall we ended up making the footer. All right. And that didn't seem to make a difference, so we can come and make it greater. Let's do like 190 and see if that makes a difference. And it does make a difference, but I still want it to go a little bit higher than that. So maybe we could do like, let's try 200 pixels or 210 or something. And that might be okay. Let's do, actually let's like do 225 and see what happens. And I think I'm a little bit happier with that. All right, and so that's how we can make sure that that will scroll beyond the sticky footer area. And the other thing too that I want to do is I want this to be a little bit inset, and I want to give it a background color with a left border so that it is clearly a different section of the website. You see how it's done here, right? The other thing too that you'll notice is that the section has a border on the bottom of it to separate it, so we can also add that as well. And I think that I'd like to use the same color as these borders, right? So for reference, you could go up here and for the header, you've got some border colors, or not the header, the H1, or H2, sorry. H2's got some border colors. So we'll go ahead and use a border bottom. I'm going to copy this border bottom rule, and I'm also going to add that to the section as well so that it shows up here. Now it should show up having a rule right there. Let's do a refresh between the section and this contributor area. Okay, so the other thing that I can do is I can now look at this contributor area and think about maybe pushing it in a little. Notice how it's done here. I don't push it in from this edge, right? So I want this edge to align up with the border like this, but I want all of this stuff to be pushed in. So that means that I'll have to pad it, but I'm going to go ahead and give it a border. So let's go to the footer and we'll just say, I'm going to paste that border bottom, but instead of 1 pixel, it's going to be much more, it's going to be a lot thicker. So let's make that, let's try like 10 pixels. And we're going to go to the mimic the position. Let's pull this over so that we can see a little bit better. And I don't want that to be border bottom. I want it to be border left, like that. Okay. And you see that there we get a left border. Let's click off of it so we can actually see it better. And you get that left border. And then I want to also make sure that there's extra space at the top and the bottom. See how it just gets cut off right there? That's because I need to, on the actual footer, I need to pad it. So let's do, I've got padding at 0 and then at 1em. So let's change that so that the padding is a little bit different, and it's not going to be uniform all the way around. All right, so let's start with like maybe at the top. If remember this is going to be the top position, we can say let's try 0.5em, and then for the, let's say for the right side it can be 1em. Let's see what happens if we do 1em for the bottom, and then for the left, let's do it a little bit more. Let's see what happens if we bump it in to 2em. And let's take a peek and see how that kind of pans out. And that's kind of a little bit awkward actually. It's not working out there, even though it works out a little bit here. So let's do refresh and make sure that it's not jumping around in a weird way. And so here, I think that this is sort of a problem, that it's not actually, the border is not actually covering the whole thing. And you might be wondering why that's happening. Well, remember what's going on is that we've got a float in here. And remember how I told you several times before that when you have something that's a float, its parent element has to have an overflow of hidden. Well, this footer is the parent of that floating image. So let's do overflow and hidden and see if that fixes the problem. And now if I scale this out, it did in fact fix the problem, you can see. Okay. The thing is that I don't necessarily like this touching this border up here. And so what I want to do is it says margin auto, but instead I want to give it a top and bottom margin so that it is pushing itself away from this border that's attached to the section up here. So let's do like 1M on the top and bottom and left and right auto, and we can see how if we're okay with that, maybe 1.5M or something. And then this about the contributor can have a background color. And if you're not sure what color you want it to be, you can always just right click, inspect, and let's just mess around with our color picker. So I'm going to go here and find where it says footer so that we can see, you know, all the places that it's going to actually fill in with color. And it's only going to be this green area. When I hover, it's only the green area that's going to get the background color because that's padding. Remember, orange is showing, all the orange stuff that's showing, that's margin. And so remember, margin doesn't get a background color. It's transparent. So let's say that we're going to go and just add something like background, and let's just say red for right now. And then that way we can get a color picker. And I can pick from a color, like I can pick from here and sort of go based off of that. If I don't like that, I can also go and pick from somewhere in here maybe, right? And work from that, and then, you know, maybe come up and find a paler color, something in this ballpark, you know. Anyway, you can kind of monkey around with that. I found a value that I kind of liked, and I went ahead and I pasted this in. And so I think that that's what I'm going to stick with. All right, and then I can just copy this rule, and I can come back over here to my footer, and I can add that background color. And so now I've got this about the contributor piece of information. And now that I'm here, I'm realizing that all this extra space is a little bit too much. And I think part of the problem that was happening before is because I had not done the overflow hidden. And so as a result, I had to add too much padding to the bottom of this. So where I had, I think it was like 225 pixels of padding on the article, it doesn't need that much right here. So let's go back to doing something like, let's see what 100 does. Ugh, I hate it when it opens things like that. All right, so let's try like 100 pixels and see if that is any better. And that actually is fine. It's going to be just fine like that. Yeah, and so I could leave it just like that, and that would be okay. Now, the other thing that I'd want to do is notice how this text is bumping right up against the image. So I would want to write a rule down here, or actually just add a declaration to the footer image so that instead of padding, because remember I've already got padding, that's what's on the inside of this border, I need to bump something away and give it margin, which is sort of like personal space, right? So I need to say that the image has a margin that it carries with it. Let's say margin right, because I don't want it to add margins to the top and bottom and left. Let's say that it's like 1M and it bumps it off the edge like that, and I might be okay with that. The other thing too is I feel like this text is a little bit too large and it shouldn't be the same size as all this other text. So I'm going to go down here and let's first of all look, it's a paragraph. So I'm going to say that the text, oh, I can also do this. I can also just say that the text in the footer is smaller, but that's also going to affect the H3. So I don't want to do that. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to say footer P for footer paragraph, and I'll do a smaller font size, just slightly smaller. So font size, and let's try like 0.9M. So it's a little bit smaller, but not too much, right? And the other thing too is that I think I'd like for it to start a little bit lower. So I'll do padding. Let's just see what happens at 1M padding. And that might work just fine there. I don't know how well it looks here. On larger screens, on smaller screens, it's okay. So I might be okay with 1M. I could also do like 1.15M or something like that. And then it would just end up wrapping, if it, right? So that's okay. And then the other thing too, I don't like the color of this about the contributor. Like I don't care for that. And I don't think I really like this rule here. I think I want them to match this sort of bright magenta pink. So I'm going to first of all, I'm going to create, well, what might be easy here is if I just right-click about the contributor. Let's do an inspect. And I can take the color, and then I can just color pick straight from here. It grabs the right color. All right, and then I can just copy that. Just copy that H3. And we need to make a special rule for the footer H3, right? So let's do it right here, footer H3, and I'll say color is that. And I need to get rid of that extra hashtag. Okay, and then the other thing too that I can do is I need to change the border color for the footer. I said I didn't like that border left. Let's paste that magenta there. Close this up. Let's do a refresh on the page so all of those selections go away. I think that looks pretty good. It's not too bad. I'll go up here, do a save all. Okay, and your page is essentially styled now, right? So you've got this thing that you just created that's got a lot of complicated positioning stuff, right? So you've got it so that whenever you scroll up, this header, it scrolls up and reveals the sticky footer that stays in place, and everything else scrolls under it. And yeah, it's working out pretty well, right? Now, the other thing too that you might notice, this is the last thing, is that if you were to go ahead and let's do an inspector again. And let's say that you wanted to see what this looked like in a mobile view, like in a phone or something. If there's this little button up here that says toggle device toolbar, it's to take it into a mobile browser view. And you can see how it would end up looking on a mobile device, right? And this text ends up being way too big. I think it does anyway. And then if you went to something even smaller, then you would end up having problems with the text being so big. But otherwise, you can see that it's working pretty well. It's not too bad. And on a mobile view, you might not want your margins to be quite so wide. You might want them to go further out to the edge for an economy of space so that people don't have to scroll as much. And also so that their eyes don't have to wrap as frequently. So there are some other things that you can do. And I'm going to do that in the next video where we're going to talk about writing a really simple thing called a media query, where it will detect the size of the screen, and then you can make some adjustments based on that.